Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. We want to give a few minutes for everyone to get logged in. So excited to start this conversation. So grab your glass of sweet tea or hot tea or whatever you need for the evening, and we'll start in just a few seconds. Hello, hello. So glad you guys are here tonight. Welcome. My name is Marie Boone Clark, and I am founder of Birthing the Magic Collaborative. For those who don't know, our work is focused solely on curating virtual, evidence-based perinatal education for Black birthing people and those who care for them. I'm excited tonight to have I don't know if I can get Jamie to come on camera for just a few minutes to have a co-conspirator today, Jamie Helberg. Jamie is with Promise Venture Studio, and they were kind enough to underwrite our CE. So I'll let Jamie do an introduction, and then we're going to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Marie. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Jamie Helberg. I've been at Promise Venture Studio for about over 2 years, but part of my work is running the Early Childhood Leaders of Color Collaborative, who many of our wonderful panelists are a part of. And so I'll drop a little bit of information about what we do in the link below. And this is part of a collaboration with our United for Black Maternal Health community of practice that we run through the collaborative. And so just really excited to have some programming in partnership with Birthing the Magic. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Jamie. So again, welcome to Milk, Magic, and Motherlines, Reclaiming Our Sacred Start. We are going to treat this as not only a learning experience, but a sacred circle that invites the wisdom of our ancestors, emotional truth, reclamation around breastfeeding. We know that there's a lot in this space. And joining me tonight are three amazing women. We'll start with Xavier Bell, and Zay is a writer, a storyteller. She brings a very deep and personal lens to not only the culture of healing, but our lived experiences. And joining Jay is Ajoa Ayesu Greenlee. She's a practitioner, an educator. She's dedicated to connecting wellness, spirituality, and culture. She works to hold a sacred space for women during the birth journey. And then last, but certainly not least, is Cierra Murphy-Higgs, who is a maternal health advocate, an IBCLC lactation consultant specialist, and she's committed to supporting women and Black and families as they go through their perinatal and feeding journey. But I always say that my babbling introductions are never quite what everyone does. So I am going to ask two things of our panelists. First is introduce yourself, and then what about this conversation resonated with you for you to say, okay, Marie, I'll take this evening and spend an hour with y'all. Ajoa, would you share with us a quick introduction or clean up what I messed up, and then what brought you here today?
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. Again, my name is Ajoa Ayesu Greenlee. I'm a full spectrum doula, founder of Lotus Ring Wellness. My purpose is to reconnect mothers back to themselves along the perinatal journey. What drew me to this topic, and basically it was the words because breastfeeding lactation is very sacred, and we need to get back to where our starts and how we connect with our ancestors and our culture and really at what of lactation, which is a major part in the beginnings of motherhood. So that's all I have right now before I dive right in because I'm super excited for this conversation. But thank you, Marie.
Me too. Thank you, Ajoa. Cierra.
Yes. So excited to be here with you guys tonight. I am like Marie said, an IBCLC. I'm also an educator and I serve as the didactic coordinator at North Carolina A&T State University's Pathway to Lactation program. I like to say that I kind of live at the intersection between mental health and infant feeding. And so I love to do education for families, communities, as well as providers and how we can better support families through this journey.
Thank you, Cierra. And last but certainly not least, Miss Day.
Thank you, Marie. My name is Xavier Bell. I am the executive director of Zillow Xander. I started that nonprofit organization in 2018 after I watched my son die at UNC Chapel Hill. When people ask me who I am, I never give them my credentials because I have all the A, B, C's, and D's. I tell them that I am a disruptor and I am a table flipper. I think that we need to bring conversation to things such as this. It is unfortunate that Black women saturate the statistics, but we do not saturate the resources. And so I think that we have to be the resource. We know what the problem is. We don't have to keep talking about it. We need to be the solution, right? Why I am here. I am here because when I walked out of the hospital and I left my son, no one told me that my milk would come in. And it would be a constant reminder that I have a child that I will never be able to nurse. It was a constant reminder for 1 year as I lactated in one breast. And all they told me was that there is no medication that they can give me, nothing that they can do about it, just don't touch it. And so I'm here because I deserve better. And at the time, I did not know that I did. And so I would just wanted to bring voice to that experience.
Thank you, Zay. Every time you tell your story, I just feel I'm a crier. So if I get weepy, somebody got to take over. And I say that not in jest. When I think about your testimony. But let's talk about for those who may not know the history, our ancestral stories, the legacy of breastfeeding or providing human milk for women of color, for Black women. Can we talk a little bit about the history? Who would take us down that path? Why is there some legacy of discomfiture, perhaps, around breastfeeding for our community?
I'll start I love the history of everything about gynecology and how we really remember years ago when they had those crash test dummies and they put them in the car and they ran it into the wall. That is how they managed us. They managed us in that way. And so when we think about breastfeeding, Black women were reproductive factories. We brought billions of dollars worth of revenue to the United States by producing children. What they did not take into account is that we love our kids no matter what condition we are in, and we want to provide the best life for them. We want to provide the best food for them, and the best food for them is what our bodies made. However, what they decided to do was take motherhood and declare it as industry. And so we were responsible for being wet nurses. And so one of our breasts was assigned to our children, and the other breast was assigned to the children that we tended to that were white. What happened when your one breast that you could not mix, right? With the child that you tended to. What happened when that breast dried up? What happened when that breast dried up is that your baby starved. And so for a lot of us, when we look at intergenerational and transgenerational trauma, we have the onset of abandonment and neglect already that we're fighting through, because we have the residue of having to watch our children die and not tend to them in the way that we should have been able to. And so as time went on, breastfeeding became repulsive to Black women. We did not have the time to do it. There were implementations in the government like Great Society from Lyndon Johnson that just dismantled the Black family and left the dad out of the picture. And so Black women did not have the time, because they were working 2 and 3 jobs, to make sure that the rest of their children ate. And so this government, specifically the government and the administration that we have now, has never ever been advocates for anything great when it came to reproduction, when it came to Black women, and breastfeeding was one of those. And so we never had the leisure to rest in tending to our children in that way. We never had the support, and also it kind of just came, to the family, where it was just something that was so, we just really didn't even see it in our household, Black women sitting around breastfeeding, that it was something that was unfamiliar and unheard of. And so it really it went from a tradition to a nuisance. It went from a tradition to a thorn for us. And that has been unfortunate for Black women.
Say thank you. That was I have to confess, after, as my husband says, playing a doctor on TV, doing all these workshops, I did not realize there was a breast that was assigned to. I didn't know that. So I even learned something today. And you said something that piqued my interest, and that is, how does, and I'll pose this question to Cierra as our mental health professional, how does generational trauma, the survival patterns that Zay just described, the grief, the silences, all those things that come from the mother lines, how does it affect Black women and how we experience breastfeeding today?
Yeah, it's so interesting, because even when we're thinking about some of these psychology classes that I even took in undergrad, they posed with how lived experiences and traumas can literally change our DNA,
Mm,
and that you carry that literally in your DNA. And and when I was 20, learning about this, it's just like, okay, this thing, but then I'm here now, and I'm thinking about this, and how those lived experiences come through me.
mm,
And as I think about my mom, as I think about my grandmother, my great grandmother, and with as being from someone whose family line is within North Carolina, we know the areas in which my family were enslaved. Um, it's it's a heavy load to carry. And what's so interesting when we're thinking about, from what Zay just shared, that Black women literally fed communities, and then to see now in lactation, right? Now it's gatekept to then keep Black women out, and how difficult it is for many of us to even gain this licensure. And that is what I think is so interesting, because wow, our milk fed entire communities,
mhm.
not even just of our children. And now all we have to listen to is these stats that Black women don't breastfeed.
Right.
And we're at the bottom of every statistic.
Mhm.
And even how that messes with you mentally. With my second daughter, it was almost like, I knew too much, is how I felt. And so much of my anxiety was around, because people throw out these stats not realizing these are people. That was Zay's story. That was Zay's son. It's not a number.
Right.
And so when you're connected to this community and realizing these are people, these are lineage, this is story, it's not just a stat, and the weight that then carries
Mhm.
is, it's a lot to hold, and it's a lot to kind of then take with you, and it's so interesting. um you know, I have worked full time in the hospital setting as a lactation consultant, and my kind of white counterparts can't really understand the weight that the matriarch of the family carries. So let's say, I'm dealing with a new mom and she's maybe the first person between her and her grandmother that is breastfeeding. And I'll have colleagues be like, well, isn't she in her 30s? Why does what her mom says matters? And I'm like, you have no idea. You have no idea the
Yeah.
weight that this young lady is carrying to now. I almost liken it to, the traditional idea of you know, the like Columbus and all them when they're like, okay, they're paving these new pathways on this
Mhm.
new land, right? But that's kind of what I envision for mothers right now in this generation that are trying to reclaim some of this. It's like I am paving these new pathways for myself, but the women that came before me that this was stolen from, and then the people that are coming behind me. And so it's a big weight. It's a big responsibility. And again, that's why I agree with Ajwa that this work is so sacred because of that. And it takes really us that understand the weight to really be able to continue to educate others, but support new moms, new parents.
Mm. That brings so many questions, but I'm not going to ask them all yet. I want to go to something that you said about the barriers to not only those moms who want to breastfeed, choose to breastfeed, but then something you touched on that I'd like us to circle back about the difficulty in becoming certified. For those who may not know what you mean by that, Cierra, I'll tell you, when I was introduced to Cierra, my co-founder is a neo, and I don't know how she found you, Cierra, but she sent me a text with Cierra's information and said, found another unicorn. And in our community as birth workers, an IBCLC is a unicorn. But explain, if you would, Cierra, for those in the audience who may struggle to find a lactation specialist that looks like them. Why is it so difficult?
Yes. So there are three different pathways to become an IBCLC, and most times you see Black and Brown women go through two of them. The one that I completed was pathway two, and you have to have at minimum 9 kind of like college or community college credit hours and like biology, anatomy, some of those different things. At the university that I attended for the program, you already had to have a bachelor's degree, which is already kind of prohibitive for people that don't have a bachelor's, because it was in a graduate level college. Then you have to get 95 lactation credit out like hours of
Mhm.
education, lactation specific education. And then you have to get 300 hours that are supervised by another IBCLC. If you do pathway 3, it's the same, 9 college or community college classes, the 95 hours, and then it's 1,000 hours that you have to get with an IBCLC. And almost every time I go speak at any event, I always have a Black woman come up to me telling me how difficult it is for them to be able to find someone to allow them to shadow. I've
Mhm.
had a Black woman that told me she reached out to a few of the white IBCLCs in her area and they just ghost her, don't even respond when they find out or see who she is. Um, and then a lot of times people may charge
Mhm.
for them to mentor you because it is time because you're teaching, doing all those things. But a lot of times it's just really expensive when you're thinking about if I'm working full time, when do I also find time to pay for this 95 lactation hours? education specific hours. And then get 1,000 hours is a lot of time.
Right, right.
A lot of time.
Thank you. So I wanted to ground us in that because I don't always, sometimes we assume that everyone knows what we mean. So we talked about the barriers to the profession, right? Let's talk about some of the barriers in whether it's the workplace, family dynamics. We touched on the what I call the grandmother dynamic a little bit, but the family dynamic, the cultural stigma that tends to go along with providing breast milk can let's all three of you share with me through your lens, what have you seen as first some of the barriers for Black women breastfeeding?
Um, I can answer that one to start. One of the biggest things, kind of piggyback that Zay had mentioned, Marie, you also said that you learned something about history and the generational trauma. For me, so I'm kind of I come from a different approach. So my name is different. My family is from West Africa, specifically Ghana, was breastfeeding. So my approach initially in birth work was breastfeeding champion, do it wherever, uncovered, all kinds of stuff. And what I was met with was the culture of no, 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 cover up, or I'm not sure because of the different stigmas. And so what I'm finding now is the barriers almost kind of start within the everyday occurrences that my doula clients are experiencing. That's from people that you talk to on a regular basis, your job, your family, the media, everyday message that it is that you're somehow, it's not right to have your breasts out in public. Or, my friend tried it work. And so that's just too much work. And I gotta, get back to work and it's too hard. Really, it starts with it's too hard. And what I notice that I'm hearing is kind of like Cierra also mentioned, just the burden of breastfeeding, but it's not just the act of it, it's what comes with it. It's the metaphorical burden of um, generational trauma beyond your situation, history of it. I mean, there's so many things that come with the decision not to. Or I will have some moms now where I'm, championing them if they're like, I think I want to. I'm like, okay, and I almost find myself hesitating. Well, if it doesn't work, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up. But I notice they're also warring with themselves about whether or not they want to embark on this arduous, exhausting, tiring, overwhelming journey. And I just noticed, I'm like, man, I know this isn't just from the individual circumstances, it's from so many other factors. And so it's kind of like, which one do I help them tackle first? Is it their apprehensions, their doubt? Is it, the whispers from family members? Is it the media? Like I'm trying to figure out where to start. But really I just kind of I try to I try to begin with them kind of believing that they can do it. For some, it's like a big, huge, scary dinosaur that they don't feel like they can tackle. So I make the dinosaur a little bit smaller into a lizard. And I try to say, hey, let's just take it day by day, one feeding at a time. See how you feel. What are your emotions behind it? What is it that you are wanting to, what would you like to accomplish? Where do you see yourself in terms of your feeding journey? I would like for them to stick to breastfeeding, of course, being a CLC and being a doula and all the warm fuzzy things, but I'm realizing we have to dismantle their world first and what breastfeeding looks like at their level initially. So.
That's a brilliant, brilliant point. And yeah, so let's take it, what did you say? How you struggle with how to help the mom address the various issues. So let's talk about the cultural things. Because I know as a woman of a certain age, when I had my daughter 43 years ago, my mother said, if that boy couldn't afford y'all, why'd y'all get married? Because I was breastfeeding. And in her world, if you breastfed, you were broke, right? And she's like, well, if he couldn't afford a wife and child, what y'all doing? And so I wonder how much that still permeates. So that's the grandmother part, right? So how do we address that one? What are some of the tools for the mamas, the expectant mamas that are on the call, having the conversation with their families?
This is a very good question. So a couple things I want to say. The first thing I want to say is representation is always key, because you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? And so when we are looking at the representation and we're looking at the full scope of what representation in lactation looks like, there is about 21,000 IBCLCs in the United States. Only 400 of them are Black. That's about 2%. Okay. So we do not have a lot of representation. That's the first thing. The second thing is the grandmothers that will sit down with you and coach you into that letdown of your milk do not exist anymore. We don't have the granny midwives. We don't have the older women with wisdom that really advocated for women to breastfeed. Now we have people bringing cabbage leaves to your house to dry your milk up. That's what we have, because breastfeeding is seen as an inconvenience. The other piece that we have to take into account is what we do not see is not familiar. We don't. I'm an Alabamian. You don't see people in your household breastfeeding out in public, right? Or sitting in the living room. If you breastfeeding, you go to the back of the house.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yeah.
Okay. If you are breastfeeding, the baby's about to die of a heat stroke because you got a blanket over the baby in full summertime. Okay. So these are things that we have a big issue with modesty and how we have over sexualized what feeding our children looks like. Right. So for us, our breasts belong to Gary, right? They don't belong to the baby, right? So breasts are designed for pleasure and not the production of milk. So I think that those are the things that we have to think about. The other thing that we have to think about is the trickery that has been associated with propaganda surrounding formula. When we think about the folks quads and how they lied to these people and gave them land that wasn't fertile, and they promised them nurses and houses and all of these things, and they had this contract with Pet Milk, right? If you don't believe me, Google it. Every single one of those women died of breast cancer. Every single one of them did. And so it made it so convenient, right? It made it so convenient to take some powder and put it in some water, not even taking in consideration that a cow's milk, which is the basis of formula, is for cows. It is for cows. And so we just made it such a luxury to have access to formula. And I'm not saying that it's not okay to have formula, but what I am saying is that we should not rob Black women of the opportunity to nurse their children because we do not support them and they do not have the supports in their community, because we do not want to put in the sweat equity to educate them and support them on their journey. And that is the problem that we're having.
Yeah.
You're preaching, and I echo them. Preach.
There's so much of what Zay said that is so important to look at, because I feel like I love looking at from more of a systems approach. And there was research that I read recently that said that public discourse frames breastfeeding as a personal choice, but it's not, due to suboptimal systems and supports. And so while, it's you that is like, oh, do you want to choose? But it's like there's so many of these other factors that are actually playing into it. And to Zay's point, when she brought up the numbers for how many of the IBCLCs are Black or of color at all, IBCLC, who is our governing body, doesn't even put out data with those specifics. They don't even show the data. because they know it's so low.
Mhm.
And I know in North Carolina, before I became an IBCLC, this was in 2020, there were 13 Black IBC, or not even just Black, IBCLCs of color in the whole state of North Carolina. And so when you're thinking about, you're not seeing the professional support, the only other options are for you to call back to the hospital, which you already don't feel safe. When I think about for my, my husband is one of 8 kids. We had several nieces and nephews before we even had our first, but I was the first one to breastfeed. And for that year, I got so many comments from everybody. But then every baby that has come since has been given breast milk. But somebody had to blaze the trail first. And even to the comment that you received, Marie, something that I love to even point out to the generations above is that you were specifically influenced by formula companies. That's why that is more normal to you. That was on purpose.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting. We have a free community lactation clinic on campus at North Carolina A&T. And so many times we'll see that, moms or the grandmothers will come with their daughter that just gave birth, and how teary they get seeing the care that they're getting from Black and brown lactation consultants, because they're like, I did not have this. I did not know this. I wasn't given this education. And so there's again almost this reclamation. Like when we're talking about healing the mother lines, like that is what we're doing. And Dr. Kimmery Bug, who was the first Black IBCLC in the US, very much still alive, which is crazy when you're thinking about, people's ages. She's still moving and kicking. Just saw her 2 weeks ago. Um, she said at a conference, we are the ones we've been waiting for. And that is something that is holding on because nobody else is coming to save us. If anything, and my whole other soapbox is that how formula companies are repackaging how they're targeting Black communities by now partnering with Black birthing groups and organizations, doula organizations, and things, repurposing it. It's still happening today.
Mhm.
And so we're the ones that we're waiting for. Nobody else is coming to save us, save our communities. And like Zay said early on, we don't need anyone else. We know the issues. We don't need more of the stats. Let's make it so that choosing to breastfeed is actually my personal decision because I have the support and the education that I need.
Something that you just said, and I and Zay as well, in terms of we know what we need. So we know that we need culturally congruent care. We need to be able to have someone, whether it's that, we may not see the nurse or the IBCLC in the hospital that looks like us. We may not see an IBCLC at all, right? Because so many hospitals, it'll be a 5,000 birth hospital and they have one IBCLC and she works 7 to 3:30. And so don't give birth at night. You may not see her. I've shared with some people, my daughter had a textbook perfect, beautiful pregnancy. She had a C-section, scheduled C-section because baby boy was not turning. And one of my best friends is an IBCLC. So as Grace is going in for her scheduled C-section, Paula says, "Oh, ask them for a pump. So while you're waiting for them to take you back, you can start pumping, right? You can get the colostrum and all this other good stuff." So Grace rolls in and she's like, "Can I get a pump?" And they said, "Oh, we'll bring you one." And she's going in at like noon or whatever. It wasn't like a schedule, but it was like, we got to take her baby. And they weren't going to take the baby until, later that day. And she's asking for the pump. She's asking for the pump. Goes in for her C-section, still hadn't gotten the pump. I arrive, the babies are born. She's, there. And we're asking for the pump. It was not until the next day that I had to do do you know who I am attitude before the IBCLC ever came to see her. And then when she came, she didn't bring a pump. So I had to take her out in the hall and do the like, you really don't know who you're dealing with. Go get the daggone pump. And when I wrote my letter of complaint and she was called in, I heard from those who knew her and me that she basically said she didn't bring the pump because my daughter looked like me, so she was considered, chubby, and she had twins, and she wasn't going to breastfeed anyway, so why would I dirty my pump? And this is in a hospital that had been chasing baby friendly. For y'all that don't know, look it up, forever. So having been the formula person before, I could say, y'all been blaming us because you weren't hitting your baby friendly status. It was the enemy within. Because if she said that to my daughter, who is very well educated, and her mom is in there like giving you the eye, what do you think she's doing to everyone else? She's so I digress.
Yeah.
So,
But that's not
and
uncommon.
yes, it is sad, Ariel, that I had to do the grandma thing, but my son-in-law still laughs because he said he had never seen me. I didn't scream. I'm one of those that I pull you close and look like I'm going to choke you. So with that said, let's talk about something else that is often a challenge for, because we know the reality is the infant mortality rate is higher among Black women, right? So we know there's a significant percent of our sisters who have a loss. Let's talk about lactating after loss. As Zay said, she had no um, forewarning. How do we hold space for those women, for those families during this moment of grief? And when all the other things are going on, how do we as practitioners make space for those mamas to prepare them for what can happen? Zay, I know this is an expertise for you.
Um, this is, I feel like it's a loaded question because there's so many different things that we don't have, right? Um, when we look and we think about how it's very strategic in how we're set up to fail reproductively. So the year that my son died, 806 babies died in North Carolina. If you lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, you were 6 times more likely to lose your child if you were Black at the time. I do not know what those statistics look like today. Going into the into my pregnancy, they consider me geriatric. So at first they're just like, okay, you're over 35. This is a geriatric pregnancy. They really did not listen to the concerns that I had. And so I knew that something was going on. I knew that I felt my son low in my cervix, and they told me that he was too small for me to feel him in my cervix. So it was probably, I was spotting probably because I was constipated. And I had an anatomy scan the next week, and they told me just tell your doctor, right? The interesting thing about that is before, when I told my doctor about feeling my son low in my cervix before I started spotting and cramping, my doctor changed my due date by 10 days and said that my son was measuring small. Mind you, his dad is like 5'7". I am 5'5", but also statistically, when we look at weathering, Black women carry smaller children. So when I went into labor, I asked for every doctor in the hospital to come to my room and explain to me why they could not save my son. And they told me he's measuring it. He's going to be 21 weeks and 6 days because they had taken 10 days. If he was only 23 weeks, we could intervene. So when I had my son, I remember the Black nurse looking at him saying, wow, he's larger than we anticipated. Do you want us to call the NICU? And the white provider said no. So I say all of that to say, not only do we have to navigate through not being heard, we have to navigate through not being seen, because I'm a woman that holds a master's degree. But when I walked into UNC Chapel Hill, when I walked in for an appointment, the first thing that the registration clerk asked me at my doctor's office was, "You're going to be using Medicaid today, right?" Instead of just asking me what type of insurance I was going to have, that I was using. So we're not seen, we're not heard, right? And the medical books that they have do not favor the hands-on attention that we need as Black people, because they still believe that we have a higher pain tolerance. They still believe that our skin is thick, right? They still believe we exaggerate and we exacerbate things, right? They still believe those things. And so all of those things set us up to fail. And because we go into the hospitals and it has been received as normal. This is normal for Black women to go into a hospital and their children die. So we don't have to provide them with anything after that, right? And so Black women are going in facing not being seen, not being heard, not being advocated for, not being tended to, not being medically supported, and then you're released to be a mental mess. And so when I walked out of the hospital, not only did I have breasts that were going to produce milk to feed a baby that my body thought was here and my heart wished it was, right? That wasn't. I had to consistently wake up every morning recognizing that they released me without the proper care. So not only am I grieving the fact that I have lost a son, but I'm also grieving the fact that you did not tend to me the way that you said. You took an oath to see me as a person, and you don't do that.
Right.
And they're able to operate in bad behavior and misconduct without any type of recourse. And so those are the things that women that are losing their babies at a higher rate than anyone else in the United States have to go through. Because at the end of the day, you could have provided a solution that looked like, hey, not only do we offer Infamil and Similac in the nursery, we also have a partnership with the milk bank. If you would like, you could donate your milk. Those options, they're not giving us any options. And so I said this time and time again, and I will continue to say it. When you lose a child and you are released unsupported, it's like waking up and dying every single day. And you do that in silence because Black women still live in the fallacy that we're strong.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't know that we don't have to be.
Right.
Right.
That was more than, as old folks would say, more than a notion, Zay. And I, my first, when you said that they were like, no, don't call the NICU. My first thought is, why not? Especially if you adjusted by those 10 days. And if she's saying he's bigger than what we thought, and if you were that close, why wouldn't you have the neonatologist there anyway? But that's a whole other conversation. As Nicole says, that's heavy. It is very. So I almost want to sit in it for a moment, but I know we're running out of time. I'll open the floor for reaction from our audience, from our team, from our folks in the chat. Anyone have something you want to say? Drop it in the chat, put in the Q&A. Actually, if you raise your hand, there is a way for us to unmute you. And you are right, Jatoya, donor milk is not offered. And in that defense, donor milk isn't offered because often the milk banks don't have sufficient donor milk for the babies that are in the hospitals. And then when it is offered, it's extremely expensive. But I think, we don't always need the donor milk if we could get our mamas the support they need. And so many times you talk to folks who are working in the NICU and we see it there as well, right? That the mom is not told why there's a benefit to her, using human milk, that we don't use the term human milk as opposed to breast milk. So she doesn't understand, because how am I breastfeeding my baby when he's in an incubator? I remember being in a unit years and years ago, and they had airlifted an infant in, and my friend, who was the RD, one of the things she told the transport team is get the mama's colostrum. And they call back and say she didn't want to breastfeed, she didn't want to do it. And my friend is like, why? Just have her pump, have her, long story short, this little girl who was younger, they kept talking about breast milk, right? I'm standing in whatever this level 2, level 3 NICU, and I see my baby in the incubator. And think about back in the day, the incubator had these 2 circles that the nurses and docs put their hands in to do their work. So her thought was, you're asking me to breastfeed, so I'm going to stand here and she thought they wanted, because there's what are those 2 circles for? And they kept saying breast milk as opposed to human milk. So she would understand. But I think we need to do more to educate.
I
So,
want
okay,
to add to what you're saying, Marie. Sorry, but
yeah.
the conversation about even talking about loss in the Black community, is we shy away from it. Though our statistics and numbers are the worst, to put in a mother's mind that it is a possibility and this could happen, which is the education portion of it, it doesn't happen. And the education needs to be, again, like Zay said, on all fronts. Because what happened with Zay and her son should have had such an impact on that hospital, those doctors, every single person,
Mhm.
and to say what happened here. Something happened, and everybody needs to be held accountable. We need to really look at this. And on the other side of it too, in as you're describing the NICU experience, they don't talk about what happens when your baby goes to the NICU. In our community, it's just kind of like, well, if the baby ends up in NICU, this is another. But what I actually had my daughter in the NICU. It was for a total of 3 days, but that was a very eye-opening experience. I was looking around the parents that had been there for over a month. Nobody explained what the NICU was. They just kind of said, okay, your baby's in the NICU, just need a little more a little more attention, just kind of, monitoring, just more monitoring, more monitoring. I didn't understand what was, because my mom is IBCLC, maternal fetal nurse, midwife from overseas, all kinds of things. She said, okay, so we're going to get this pump going. So go ahead and pump, and then, go ahead and give it to me. Go. She was on it. But without that, the shock of birth, because birth is, it's a traumatic process too. Being in the NICU, all of the different things. I had a C-section, the whirlwind of everything going on around me, comprehend what was happening. And we don't talk to enough mothers in the Black community about the NICU experience. What happens? How can you still start your breastfeeding journey if you do have your baby in the NICU? Like you said, human milk, having just that message of human milk, breast milk, you can still nourish and feed your baby, even if your birth turned out a little bit different. So I just wanted to add that we just need more education all around on all fronts, for sure.
I
I echo all the hearts that are going up. That is so true, Ajoa.
can
And
I add
so
really quick,
often,
Marie.
yes.
To Ajoa, to your point, what's so interesting is that we know that Black and brown babies are more represented in NICUs,
Mhm.
but the staff that is not representative of that. And so that level of care is not there.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting to overhear how also Black and brown parents are demonized too.
Mhm.
Um, when you're thinking about from a provider or nurse's standpoint, it's like, okay, maybe I had to return back to work, which we know that Black women generally have the least amount of time of maternity leave, and how they're demonized by staff for, I would never leave my baby alone in here. But if my baby's here for months, what are my other options here, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so that is a huge piece. And then you go home, and then almost the trauma. So many NICU parents have shared with me about how they're used to their baby being on this monitor, like is being monitored 24/7. And now no one's telling me even how to really properly care for this maybe medically fragile baby. And now it's all my responsibility when I go home and I don't even, they're not properly talking about like what's the follow-up. All of these things, it's really heartbreaking to see.
It is indeed. And there was, I don't know if you guys saw it, I'm going to drop it in the chat. There was a study, even in 2025, published in one of the pediatric journals about the maltreatment of Black families in the NICU. Someone had their hand up. Hold on. Ashley, I'm going to unmute you, I think. Did I?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, everyone. And I'll be brief. First, I just want to say, thank you for sharing. That was uh, very powerful. That's not even really the most appropriate word to use. But to give you some context, I am a nurse. I have clinical experience in the NICU. I have experience also in performance improvement. So during the morbidity and mortality review, so that where we hold the doctors accountable. And so a case like yours is one that I would put it together, I would bring to the review. And I will, and a new mother myself, I have a 3-month-old. And I will say this, the hospital is the only place where you can have a bad outcome and you can be harmed with immunity, unfortunately. And I hate that that's the reality, but I'm working in that space, right? So I see it a lot, and experienced it myself with my daughter. I'm a mother that experienced peripartum cardiomyopathy, so I went into heart failure. I get it. So we are having these things, and like I said, I am educated. I am a clinician. All of those things. Um, and so what I try to tell everyone is, you have to bring a bulldog with you. You have to advocate for yourself, and you we have to do a better job of advocating as professionals, advocating for our patients to have the right person there, to ask the right questions, to have our back, to step in. Thankfully, I, had that round the clock. No, I had, nurses and NPs that were by my side, my homegirls. So they were not going to let anything slide. But everyone doesn't have that. And it was just really eye-opening that I had that. And I still had some things going on that just I felt like should not have been happening, right? So engaging. So I think, speaking about all of this from a clinical perspective, from the perspective of a clinician, we have got to really engage family. We work on the person, but we got to bring family in because that's who's going to help to step in. We, have to check our colleagues when they make comments like assuming that someone is on Medicaid, or when they do not explain, like just saying the NICU. Don't a lot of people don't even know what that means, right? Um, and so we have to we want to see better outcomes for people who look like us. And so we have to take that extra step to do that. And then we also have to advocate for um, for professionals like our doulas. Obviously, if you are IBCLC, you can bill like through insurance, but all of our look, Sierra was like, I don't know, girl. Child, depending on where you are, right? What state and all
Some
those
of them
different
do. You're
things.
right. You're right.
But I think that's some of the work we have to talk about doing also, is like making sure that folks can get paid for this work so
Yeah.
that we can continue it, because we got to be realistic. Like there are things we would love to do, but we also have to eat and feed our families, right? And so that doesn't happen. And then I will, say this, and I just want to put this out there in everyone's head. And I know this is, it's definitely cost prohibitive, but I was very thankful that I had the opportunity. I was gifted a postnatal retreat stay where I had a doula 24/7. I had a nurse checking on me 24/7. I had a lactation consultant that came in. I had my meals. I mean, I had everything, and it sounds like a luxury, and it is, but it should not be a luxury because in those days, especially because of the health issue complication I had myself, um, I absolutely needed somebody to be able, like me and my baby needed that round the clock care
Yeah.
outside of the hospital, right? And you can't
Right.
always have that. So I think also talking about how do we create that, how do we help our patients to create that within, if they can't afford to do it in a structured,
And you make
whatever, how do they create that for themselves so that we can care for them at that time. And I'll tell you the reason why my friends were able, or my mother
And I
supported
think
that
I
is
think
because I
you bring up a
disassociated
good
after
point,
my
Ashley.
first. Yeah,
You bring up a good point about creating that village
yeah,
for the mom, and that may be a topic that we need to talk about a
yeah.
bit more. We've had a couple of workshops about it, and I know that like New York City has the
And Atlanta has one.
and
Yeah,
Atlanta has so some of the
yeah,
major cities, but it can also be replicated with your village. I
absolutely.
don't want us to run out of time before we
I'm
allow
sorry. Yeah.
and I may not be pronouncing your name right, Jah. Allow her to talk. And thank you, Ashley. I want to circle back to you on that conversation. Ja?
Hi, how are you? Yes, you did say it right. So I am a birth worker here in North Carolina, and I am fairly new to it. Um, and I think what drew me into it was my experience. Um, I Unfortunately, I had quite a different experience than most Black women have. My experience during my pregnancy was nothing but great, even down to the people who supported me with lactating. I remember mine, being that I didn't want to, I was frustrated with it. And my lactation consultant was this older white lady, and she was like, I don't care what you say, you're doing it. And she stuck with me, and she, every time I said I wanted to do formula, she refused. And I'm grateful for her for allowing me to have that experience to bond with my child. But I do notice that it is a lot where they're now pressuring moms, to especially Black mothers, to turn towards formula. And I think I find for me, and especially being new, is that line of where I'm trying to advocate for the mother with finding lactation support for her, but also not trying to um how you say, I guess, cross any boundaries there at the hospital. Because I've spoken with other birth workers that have tried and advocating for mothers in some of the hospitals in the area, and have gotten banned, because they felt like that they were overstepping their boundaries and stuff. So I guess my question would be how exactly what's the best approach for advocating for mothers to actually get that support in lactation?
Oh, that's a good question, Ja. I'm going to let the experts answer, but I'm going to give you one idea that I have is start educating mama before she gets to the hospital. That should be a conversation that you're having with her by her second trimester. So that way it's not oh, I need to do what type of thing. I'll let Sierra and the other ladies share their thoughts.
Yeah, prenatal education is so key, because I feel like a lot of times if we wait to do the education after baby gets here, the stakes are already so high. We're
Mhm.
already too late. So doing that prenatal education is going to be key. And I put in the chat that family-centered education is so important. Because then if, I'm dealing with some different things or whatever, maybe my spouse, my partner, my mom, they're able to help to be those advocates for me and beside me. And so we have a local dad doula. Actually, him and his wife are both certified doulas. And he hosts a workshop here in Greensboro, North Carolina called I'm Gonna Be a Dad Now What? And he does several different classes within his workshop days, but one of it is on infant feeding. And what is their role? What does that look like in, prenatally? What does that look like in the hospital setting? What does this look like in the postpartum journey? Because then you're able to empower these dads, these partners, with feeling like, no, while you may not be latching the baby or pumping, you still have an active role in supporting your partner. And it has just been amazing to see that these dads are now like how supportive they've been. And we're telling them, hey, this is who you call when you guys need help. And so we've actually seen them making the phone calls to schedule the appointments with our clinic and
Okay.
how that can kind of be supportive. And I think in the hospital setting, relationship building as a birth worker is huge.
Yes.
It is huge. It is huge. Finding a provider that you feel like, okay, this person I kind of mesh with, because they're going to be your in that system. And so that relationship building is going to be big. And like even thinking about almost like your customer service with the nurses, the things, because then you really become this bridge between the two worlds.
Yeah.
And it takes time to do that. But it's so invaluable. And to something that Ashley said earlier, for any of my providers on the call that are working full-time in the hospital system or those things, I just want to acknowledge probably the gaslighting that you're experiencing, the things that you are overhearing that you're having to fight, because it's a lot to have to constantly check your coworkers. Um, and that is why I see a lot of times Black and brown providers end up having to leave the hospital setting. They're like, I have to go do this on my own because it is so toxic at times. And so I also want to say to my providers that work primarily within clinical settings, to my birth workers, to please make sure that you're taking care of yourselves, because this work is heart work, but it is so hard some days to be fighting up against these systems and literally asking for them to care about us, care about my sisters, care about my cousins. And that is a lot. So I do want to say, I hope everybody is in community with other birth workers and knowing that, because we care, oftentimes we are doing this for free. Um, Insurance reimbursement is actually going down in a lot of states for IBCLCs. It's almost like as more Black people become lactation consultants, we're seeing more barriers go up. And so I just want to highlight, please be in community, because we can't do this alone.
Right.
Yes. And I have another question. What was the name of the person you said that teaches the I'm going to be a dad now one in Greensboro?
I'll put his information in the chat.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
I know we're running short on time. I want to give some time for our panelists to give us some words of wisdom as I want to invite each of you to share an affirming message that you hope our audience takes forward from tonight's circle. Whether it's one word, one call to action. We'll go with you, Zay.
I have to say this before I jump into this because we didn't say anything. We didn't say anything about this. Although our Black babies are dying, our Black mamas are dying too. And they had a plan to breastfeed their children, that they will never get an opportunity to breastfeed. And so it is very important for us to advocate for those, just for the wishes of the mothers that will not raise their kids. And so how do we surround and undergird the survivors that will tend to these children with human milk? So I always want to, to just bring voice to that there are a lot of moms that want to breastfeed that will never have the opportunity to do that because they won't have the opportunity to raise their children. So, I think what I am going to say is, I say this all the time. I teach 4th grade, and I say this a million times a day. I say to my kids, if you hear my voice, clap once. And they do it. And I make them do it time and time and time and time again until the sound of their hands together sound like this mighty rolling thunder. If it's 10 times, we're gonna do it until you clap your hands hard enough for my satisfaction. What I'm gonna ask you is that, what are you doing with your hands? You have all the information that you need, right? You cannot control certain situations, but you can control what you put your hands to. And so my words of encouragement to you is, we are in a season where women are dying. We are in a season where children are dying, and we must put our hands to the plow. We cannot afford to sit back, read the statistics, and not recognize that my son is a face in that, and that I'm a face in that, and that your mother is a face in that, and that your grandmother that had to bury several of her kids are a face in that. What are you doing with your hands? Because your mouth is doing a lot of talking, but your hands are not doing mighty work. And so I am going to encourage you to be the solution, put your hands to work, and make your impact loud.
Ajoa.
Yes. She's always preaching, isn't she? Always.
I'm an Alabama man.
She is.
So, what I want to say is, we can't rewrite history. We can create our own story. We can control the narrative of our own story. And so I just want to leave everybody with this quote. And it says, when Black women breastfeed, reversing narratives, reclaiming traditions that were taken from them, countering stereotypes, and reestablishing the infant feeding norm in our communities. We have to take back what was originally ours. It's a shame to say you have to take it back because it was yours to begin with. Well, we have to create our own stories. And something as simple as one might think is the concept of breastfeeding. It's such a staple part of how we develop our families and what's at the core of motherhood in our community. So create your own story.
I love that. That should be a t-shirt. Cierra, do our baby girl want it? She is a doll baby. Oh my gosh. She is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, and my big girl says thank you too.
Oh.
I want to say two things. One, that we carry the strength of generations. I think sometimes we highlight so much of the trauma, but we carry that strength too. We carry that cultural capital in all that. As I think of my matriarchal line, I carry so much. And so keeping that in mind, and even in saying that, from what I said earlier, we are the ones we've been waiting for. And now is this time where, yes, so many things are being stripped back. We're watching that on a not even daily, hourly basis, it seems. But this is also the time where I feel like the atmosphere is setting for us to be innovative, for us to really come together, because these other things, the systems are crumbling. Now's our time to, like Zay said, put our hands to the plow, but we're the ones we've been waiting for. And I'm so thankful to be alongside you all on this panel, you all that are joining on this call as well, that also recognize the importance, but because we're the ones we've been waiting for. She's the one we've been waiting for.
So
And I'm thankful to be alongside you all doing this work. And even while doing, just understanding that we can also take our rest when we need it.
Yes.
Please take your rest when you need it, or else your body will sit you down.
So true. First of all, thank you, ladies. This has been an amazing conversation. I can't believe an hour has gone by that fast. Speaking of an hour, we are offering a CE. It is for nurses, but we also recognize that some states that require their doulas to have continuing ed will recognize nursing CEs. I will send an email, well, our team will send an email either later tonight or tomorrow with the link for you to take the assessment. After you take the assessment and successfully answer 3 or 4 questions, we will send you your certificate. But also, this is not an ending. We have a continued conversation around human milk breastfeeding and our experience. Next Wednesday, the 27th, we're going to have a very important discussion where we're going to talk about medicines and breastfeeding, led by a brilliant pharmacist. I don't know if some of you have probably seen the various conversations about what medicines are appropriate, and the FDA came out with something that was rather controversial. So come and get the facts so that you can support your patients, your family members. One of the things I think we should always consider, which Cierra brought up, was the family needs to be engaged. So if we could share this recording with your families, share it with your clients so that they can share it with their families. So then maybe grandma and them won't be like, go in the other room and all the other good stuff. But thank you all for so much. And last but not least, Jamie, thank you to Promise Ventures. Jamie dropped a link for the Early Childhood Leaders of Color, which Ajoa, Xavier, and I belong to. It's a phenomenal group. Speaking of like pouring back into yourself, it's an opportunity for you to do that. And so I'll send that link in our follow-up email so that you can learn more about the organization. Any final words of wisdom, ladies?
Keep the conversation going.
Yes, I'd like to invite you all back anytime you want. I know there's a part 2 that we need to have. There's so much where we could take bits and pieces of this and have a full conversation about supporting women who've had a loss. How do we get our families to be better equipped? The conversation about dads. Oh my gosh, you got me excited on that one, Cierra. So for all of you that joined us, thank you. Thank you to our audience, and we'll get the recording out to you later, and have a great night. Bye, beautiful girl. Good night.